Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates painted their nails and talked about boys, she spent weekends at the shooting range with her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who taught her that respect came from skill, not gender. Her hands were steady, her aim was true, and her determination burned brighter than the desert sun. When Sarah enlisted in the Navy at 18, her recruiters assumed she would choose a traditional role, like communications or medical support. Instead, she shocked everyone by requesting combat training. The paperwork sat on desks for weeks as officers debated whether to approve her request. Women weren't officially allowed in direct combat roles yet, but Sarah had found a loophole through specialized weapons training programs. Her first day at the Naval Training Facility in San Diego was brutal. Drill Sergeant Thompson took one look at her 5'4" frame and 120-pound build and shook his head. The other recruits, all men, exchanged glances that said everything without words. They had been through basic training together, formed bonds through shared suffering, and now this outsider wanted to join their exclusive brotherhood. The morning run was her first test. While the men pounded the pavement in heavy boots, Sarah kept pace despite their attempts to leave her behind. Her breathing remained steady as others began to falter. During weapons cleaning, her rifle was spotless, while some of the men struggled with basic maintenance. But it was during the first marksmanship exercise that people really began to take notice. The shooting range fell silent, except for the sharp crack of rifle fire. Target after target, Sarah's shots found their mark with mechanical precision. Her breathing was controlled, her stance perfect, her follow-through textbook. When the smoke cleared and scores were tallied, she had outshot half the men in her unit. Sergeant Thompson's expression shifted from skepticism to grudging interest. That evening in the barracks, conversations were hushed but pointed. Some men respected her performance, but others felt threatened. Private Rodriguez, a hothead from Chicago, made it clear that one good day didn't prove anything. The real tests were coming, he said, and when things got serious, she would crack, under pressure like all women did. Sarah lay on her narrow bunk that night, listening to the whispered conversations around her. She knew that every mistake would be magnified, every success diminished. The path ahead would require not just skill, but mental toughness beyond what any of these men could imagine. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she intended to meet every single one head-on. Her grandfather's words echoed in her mind as sleep finally came. Sarah, they'll always try to tell you what you can't do. Your job is to show them what you can do, then do it better than they ever thought possible. The next morning would test whether those words held true when the stakes were real and the pressure was crushing. The alarm sounded at 0500 hours, and Sarah's journey toward making military history officially began. She had no idea that within weeks her name would be whispered throughout the entire naval base, or that her actions would challenge decades of military tradition in ways no one saw coming. The specialized weapons training program was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. While regular Navy personnel learned standard firearms, this elite group worked with equipment that most soldiers never saw. The M4A1 carbines were modified with advanced optics, the sniper rifles were precision instruments worth more than most people's cars, and the explosive devices required steady hands and nerves of steel. Commander James Walsh ran the program with iron discipline. A former SEAL himself, he had initially opposed allowing women into the training but was overruled by Naval Command. His weathered face showed skepticism every time he looked at Sarah, waiting for her to prove his assumptions correct. The training was designed to break people, to separate those who belonged from those who merely thought they did. The obstacle course came first. Crawling under barbed wire while carrying a 40-pound pack and rifle, Sarah's uniform tore and her knees bled. But she never slowed down. The men around her grunted and cursed, but she remained silent, focused only on the task ahead. When Private Davis stumbled and fell, she helped him up without breaking stride, earning surprised looks from the instructors. Weapons maintenance sessions lasted hours under harsh fluorescent lights. Each component had to be cleaned, inspected, and reassembled perfectly. Sarah's attention to detail was exceptional, but some of her male counterparts struggled with the intricate mechanisms. When Johnson couldn't get his rifle to function properly, she quietly showed him the correct technique, though he pretended not to need her help. The psychological pressure intensified daily. Commander Walsh would single out individuals for criticism, testing their ability to perform under stress. When Sarah's turn came, he screamed inches from her face about how women didn't belong in combat, how she was putting lives at risk, how she should quit before someone got hurt because of her weakness. Her jaw remained set, her eyes focused straight. Ahead, her voice calm and respectful when she replied, "Yes, sir. No excuse, sir." Night operations training pushed everyone to their limits. In complete darkness, wearing heavy night vision equipment, the team had to navigate terrain, identify targets, and execute precision shots. Sarah's small stature became an advantage as she moved silently through the course. Her shots were clean and accurate, while several men missed their targets entirely due to equipment malfunctions or poor technique. The breaking point came during a particularly brutal week of training. Sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, and constant pressure had worn everyone down. 3 men had already dropped out, unable to handle the stress. During a live-fire exercise with explosive charges, Private Rodriguez made a critical error that could have injured the entire team. Sarah spotted the mistake immediately and corrected it, preventing a potential disaster. That night, Rodriguez approached her bunk with humility, replacing his earlier hostility. He thanked her quietly, admitting that his pride had nearly gotten people hurt. Other men began to see her not as an outsider trying to prove something, but as a teammate who had their backs when it mattered most. Commander Walsh watched these interactions with growing interest. His reports to headquarters began to change from skeptical observations to grudging praise. Sarah Martinez wasn't just keeping up with the men, she was excelling in areas where some of them struggled. Her technical knowledge was superior, her composure under pressure was remarkable, and her leadership instincts were becoming apparent. The real test was approaching fast. Advanced weapons certification would require her to demonstrate mastery of every system they had trained with, under conditions designed to simulate real combat stress. Failure meant immediate dismissal from the program and return to regular Navy duties. Success would mean something that had never happened before in naval history. Advanced Weapons Certification Week arrived with the intensity of a gathering storm. The naval base buzzed with unusual activity as senior officers arrived to observe the testing. Word had spread through unofficial channels that something unprecedented was happening in the specialized weapons program. A woman was not only surviving the training but potentially excelling at levels that challenged long-held military assumptions. The first test involved precision shooting with the Barrett M82 sniper rifle, a weapon system that weighed 30 pounds and delivered devastating accuracy at extreme ranges. The recoil was notorious for bruising shoulders and throwing off inexperienced shooters. Sarah approached the weapon with the same methodical preparation she brought to everything else, adjusting the scope, checking wind conditions, and calculating distance factors with mathematical precision. Her first shot struck dead center at 800 yards, the second hit within an inch of the first. By the 5th shot, even the range officers were leaning forward to confirm what their instruments were telling them. Sarah had achieved a grouping that some experienced snipers couldn't match, using a weapon that critics claimed was too powerful for women to handle effectively. Commander Walsh stood behind the observation deck with Admiral Richardson, who had flown in specifically to witness the testing. The Admiral's presence indicated that Sarah's performance had attracted attention at the highest levels of naval command. Their conversation was hushed but intense as they watched her transition smoothly between different weapon systems. The explosive, ordnance portion of the test required candidates to identify, disarm, and reconstruct various types of charges under time pressure. Sarah's grandfather had taught her about explosives during his construction work after leaving the military, giving her knowledge that supplemented her formal training. Her hands remained steady as she worked with devices that could kill everyone in the room if handled incorrectly. While other candidates sweated through the procedures, Sarah maintained the calm focus that had become her trademark. She completed each task ahead of schedule, double-checking her work with the thoroughness that instructors had learned to expect from her. When Johnson's device failed to disarm properly, she calmly walked him through the correct procedure, potentially saving his career and possibly his life. The urban combat simulation pushed physical and mental limits simultaneously. Candidates had to navigate a mock city environment while engaging targets, avoiding civilian casualties, and coordinating with team members through radio communication. The scenario was designed to recreate the chaos and split-second decision-making required in real combat situations. Sarah's performance was flawless. Her movement was efficient and purposeful, her target identification was instantaneous, and her communication was clear and professional. She adapted quickly when the scenario parameters changed unexpectedly, demonstrating the tactical flexibility that separated good soldiers from exceptional ones. Her smaller size allowed her to take cover and move through spaces that challenged larger candidates. The psychological evaluation was perhaps the most crucial test. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a military psychologist, conducted intensive interviews designed to identify weaknesses that might emerge under extreme stress. Sarah answered every question with honesty and self-awareness that impressed the evaluator. Her motivation was clear, her mental stability was unquestionable, and her commitment to military service was absolute. During the final equipment inspection, Sarah's gear was immaculate. Every weapon was clean and properly maintained. Every piece of equipment was correctly configured, and her personal appearance met the highest military standards. She stood at attention while senior officers examined her work, knowing that months of training had led to this single moment of evaluation. The results would be announced the following morning, but already the atmosphere on the base had changed. Conversations in the mess hall were different, training schedules were being quietly revised, and policy documents were being reviewed by officials who had never expected to face these questions. Sarah Martinez had forced the military to confront assumptions that had remained unchallenged for generations. That evening, as she cleaned her weapons one final time, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. Tomorrow would determine whether she had succeeded in proving that capability mattered more than gender, or whether institutional resistance would find ways to deny what everyone had witnessed with their own eyes. The morning of the announcement arrived with unusual tension throughout the naval base. Sarah reported for duty at 600 hours, but instead of regular training, she was directed to Conference Room A in the administration building. The hallways seemed longer than usual, and every face she passed carried expressions of curiosity mixed with anticipation. Inside the conference room, senior officers filled chairs around a polished table that reflected the overhead lighting. Admiral Richardson sat at the head, flanked by Commander Walsh and several other officials whose presence indicated the significance of this moment. Dr. Harper was there with her evaluation files, and Master Chief Patterson, who supervised all specialized training programs, sat with a stack of performance reports. Sarah entered and stood at attention, her uniform crisp and her bearing confident despite the butterflies in her stomach. Months of training had led to this single moment, and she knew that whatever happened next would affect not just her career, but potentially the future opportunities for women throughout the military. Admiral Richardson began by reviewing the unprecedented nature of her participation in the program. Never before had a woman completed the specialized weapons training course, much less achieved the performance levels documented in her file. Her scores weren't just passing grades. They were among the highest in the program's 15-year history. Commander Walsh, who had initially opposed her inclusion, stood to deliver his assessment. His voice was steady and professional as he detailed her technical proficiency, physical performance, and leadership qualities. The man who had tried to break her spirit through intimidation and psychological pressure now praised her mental toughness and ability to perform under extreme stress. The marksmanship scores spoke for themselves. Sarah had achieved expert ratings on every weapon system, including several that experienced male soldiers found challenging. Her accuracy with the Barrett sniper rifle had set new range records, and her performance during night operations had been flawless. The explosive ordnance work demonstrated knowledge and skill that exceeded requirements by significant margins. Dr. Harper's psychological evaluation was equally impressive. Sarah showed exceptional mental stability, clear decision-making under pressure, and leadership qualities that emerged naturally during team exercises. Her motivation was intrinsic rather than driven by a need to prove something to others, indicating sustainable long-term performance rather than short-term determination. Master Chief Patterson addressed the elephant in the room directly. Military. Culture had long assumed that certain roles were unsuitable for women based on physical limitations and psychological differences. Sarah's performance challenged these assumptions in ways that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. Her success forced an honest evaluation of policies that might be excluding capable personnel based on outdated thinking. The discussion turned to practical implications. If Sarah was certified for advanced weapons training, precedent would be established for other women to follow the same path. Training protocols would need to be evaluated for gender bias, physical requirements would need scientific justification, and the entire military structure would face pressure to examine other exclusionary policies. Admiral Richardson acknowledged these broader implications but emphasized that individual merit must be the primary consideration. Sarah Martinez had earned her place through performance, not politics or social pressure. Her certification would be based on military standards, not external expectations or internal resistance. The moment of decision arrived with formal language that carried enormous weight. Sarah Martinez was officially certified for advanced weapons systems, making her the first woman in naval history to achieve this designation. The announcement was delivered with military precision, but everyone in the room understood they were witnessing a historic moment. Sarah's response was characteristically professional. She thanked her instructors, acknowledged her fellow trainees, who had pushed her to excel, and expressed her commitment to serving with honor. Her voice remained steady despite the magnitude of what had just occurred, showing the same composure that had carried her through months of challenging training. The meeting concluded with discussions about her next assignment and the media attention that would inevitably follow. Sarah would be given opportunities to apply her training in real-world situations, proving that her certification was more than just a symbolic achievement. The military was betting that her success would continue beyond the controlled environment of training facilities. As she left the conference room, Sarah realized that the hardest part of her journey was actually just beginning. She had proven that women could handle SEAL weapons, but now she had to prove that this capability translated into effective military service under actual combat conditions. News of Sarah's certification spread through the naval base like wildfire, then rippled outward through military communities worldwide. Within hours, her achievement was being discussed in Pentagon briefing rooms, military academies, and training facilities across the country. The woman who had quietly focused on proving herself through performance suddenly found herself at the center of a national conversation about military service and gender equality. The reaction was as divided as expected. Progressive voices celebrated the breakthrough, pointing to Sarah's exceptional performance as proof that military exclusions based on gender were outdated and counterproductive. Conservative critics argued that individual success stories didn't justify wholesale policy changes, and that combat effectiveness required more than just technical proficiency with weapon systems. Sarah tried to stay focused on her duties, while the debate raged around her. Her first real-world assignment came sooner than anyone anticipated, as tensions escalated in a sensitive overseas deployment where her specialized skills were needed immediately. The Navy decided to put her certification to the ultimate test, under actual operational conditions rather than theoretical scenarios. The deployment briefing revealed the complexity of modern military operations. Sarah would be part of a joint task force providing security for diplomatic facilities in a region where terrorist threats were constant and unpredictable. Her role would involve precision shooting, explosive device detection, and rapid response to evolving tactical situations. Failure could cost lives, including her own. Arriving at the overseas base, Sarah encountered reactions ranging from professional respect to barely concealed resentment. Some personnel had followed her story and were genuinely curious to see how her training would translate to real-world performance. Others viewed her presence as an unwelcome distraction that politicized military operations and potentially compromised mission effectiveness. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson, the task force commander, was a pragmatist who cared only about results. He had reviewed Sarah's training records and test scores and was willing to judge her solely on operational performance. His briefing was direct and uncompromising. She would receive no special treatment, face no reduced expectations, and be evaluated by the same standards applied to every other team member. The first test came during a routine security sweep of diplomatic facilities. Intelligence reports suggested possible explosive devices had been planted by local insurgents, requiring immediate detection and neutralization. Sarah's training in explosive ordnance disposal would be put to use in an environment where mistakes could kill innocent civilians and compromise international relations. Working methodically through the compound, Sarah identified 3 suspicious devices using techniques learned during her certification training. Her calm professionalism impressed the local security personnel, who had been skeptical about working with an American woman in a culture where gender roles were strictly defined. Her expertise transcended cultural barriers when lives were at stake. The real breakthrough came during an unexpected firefight when the diplomatic convoy was ambushed during a routine supply run. Sarah was positioned as overwatch with her sniper rifle when insurgents opened fire from concealed positions. In the chaos of combat, theoretical training met deadly reality, and everyone would see whether months of preparation translated into effective action under fire. Sarah's first shot eliminated a sniper who was targeting the convoy from a rooftop 600 yards away. Her second shot disabled an insurgent operating a heavy machine gun that was pinning down friendly forces. Her third shot created an opening for the convoy to reach safety. Each shot was precisely placed, professionally executed, and absolutely necessary for mission success. The firefight lasted 12 minutes, but its impact extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. Sarah had performed flawlessly under combat conditions, using her specialized training to save lives and complete the mission. Her gender became irrelevant when bullets were flying and people were depending on her skills to survive. The after-action report documented not just her technical proficiency, but her leadership under pressure. When communications failed, she coordinated with ground forces using hand signals and tactical judgment. When ammunition ran low, she made every shot count. When the situation evolved rapidly, she adapted quickly and effectively. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson's evaluation was unequivocal. Sarah Martinez had proven that her certification was backed by genuine capability rather than political correctness. Her performance met and exceeded the standards expected of any soldier in similar circumstances. The question was no longer whether women could handle advanced military roles, but how quickly policies could be updated to reflect this new reality. Word of the successful deployment reached the highest levels of military command within days. Sarah had not just proven herself individually. She had demonstrated that gender integration could strengthen rather than weaken military effectiveness when based on merit and proper training. The impact of Sarah's successful deployment reverberated through military command structures with the force of an earthquake. Within weeks of her return, Pentagon officials were reviewing policies that had excluded women from specialized roles for decades. Her performance had provided undeniable proof that individual capability mattered more than gender assumptions, forcing institutional change that had seemed impossible just months earlier. Congressional hearings were scheduled to examine military gender policies, with Sarah's case serving as the primary example of successful integration. Politicians from both parties wanted to understand how her achievement could inform broader military reforms without compromising operational effectiveness. The quiet woman from Texas had inadvertently become the face of a movement she had never intended to lead. Sarah found herself assigned to the Pentagon for temporary duty, briefing senior officials on her training experience and operational deployment. Her presentations were straightforward and factual, focusing on technical details rather than social implications. She emphasized that her success resulted from rigorous training, professional standards, and support from colleagues who judged her by performance rather than preconceptions. The briefings revealed how her achievement had already influenced military culture in unexpected ways. Applications from women seeking combat roles had increased dramatically. Training programs were being evaluated for unconscious gender bias, and military academies were reassessing physical standards to ensure they measured job-relevant capabilities, rather than arbitrary benchmarks. Commander Walsh, who had initially opposed her participation, became one of her strongest advocates within the military establishment. His testimony before congressional committees was powerful precisely because his conversion from skeptic to support her was based on observed performance rather than political pressure. His credibility with traditional military leaders gave weight to arguments for expanded opportunities. The specialized weapons training program itself was transformed by lessons learned from Sarah's experience. New protocols emphasized individual assessment over demographic assumptions, and training standards were refined to focus on mission-critical skills rather than traditional military culture preferences. The program that had reluctantly accepted one woman was now actively recruiting qualified female candidates. Media attention brought both opportunities and challenges. Sarah received speaking invitations from military academies, veterans organizations, and women's groups across the country. She used these platforms to emphasize that her goal had always been military service rather than social change, though she acknowledged that her success created opportunities for others to follow similar paths. The personal cost of her achievement was significant but manageable. Death threats from extremists were handled by military security, while supportive messages from young women considering military careers provided motivation to continue speaking publicly. Sarah learned to balance her preference for privacy with her responsibility to represent the possibilities her success had created. International attention followed domestic recognition as allied militaries examined their own gender policies in light of American developments. NATO partners began sharing research and best practices for integrating women into specialized roles, while adversaries struggled to understand how gender integration might affect American military capabilities. 5 years after her initial certification, Sarah was promoted to Master Chief Petty Officer, becoming the first woman to hold that rank while serving in specialized weapons roles. Her career trajectory proved that her initial success was not an isolated achievement, but the foundation for continued excellence throughout her military service. The training facility where her journey began now features a display case highlighting achievements by graduates of the Specialized Weapons Program. Sarah's name appears alongside dozens of others who have served with distinction in combat zones worldwide. Her photograph shows a professional warrior whose gender has become far less important than her contributions to military effectiveness. Today, the question is no longer whether women can handle SEAL weapons or similar specialized military roles. Sarah Martinez answered that question definitively through performance that spoke louder than any argument or policy debate. Her response to those who said women couldn't handle advanced military training was delivered not through words but through actions that silenced critics and opened doors for future generations. The base where she first proved herself now trains both men and women in specialized weapon systems, with gender-integrated classes that would have been unthinkable before her breakthrough. Her legacy lives not in headlines or history books, but in the expanded opportunities available to qualified personnel regardless of gender. Sarah Martinez had set out simply to serve her country using the skills her grandfather had taught her at a small Texas shooting range. In doing so, she transformed military culture and proved that excellence recognizes no gender boundaries when supported by proper training, professional standards, and the courage to challenge assumptions that limit human potential.